All right. So welcome to the April collective transmission, everyone. Now, I actually want to start this off with a message that came through a dream. Now, there are some dreams that are what I would call like spirit dreams or medicine dreams, and dreams that just feel like normal dreams. And I had a dream last night that felt very significant. It felt like a medicine dream. And the more that I sat with it and felt into it, the more it felt related to what wanted to come through for the collective tonight. So I'm going to begin with that dream. Now, in the dream, I'm on top of a building, like an apartment building in a big city. And I'm watching this enormous thunderstorm roll in. And I'm with one of my best friends. And we're basically watching as all of this lightning is shooting across the sky. And there's this deep, like seismic intensity that's occurring, right? It's like center of the storm kind of feeling. And it basically surrounds us. And at some point, I say to my friend, it's probably better that we go inside. And as we're climbing down this like rusty, rickety metal ladder, right, from like the rooftop of the building, the whole building is shaking. It's like I can feel it in the dream just swaying back and forth. And it was definitely like a real tower moment. If anyone here is familiar with the tower card in tarot, right? And a tower moment is like a moment of devastation, of destruction. And it's interesting. I was digesting this with a friend, and he actually gave me kind of illuminated, helped me pull this apart. So I really want to acknowledge my friend Willie for bringing his medicine into this transmission, because it really, again, it connected everything on a level that I was like, oh, this wants to be part of this talk tonight. So I know a lot of us are feeling the intensity of what's happening globally, this sense of, right, like an impending storm that's gathering around us. And lightning is one of my favorite elementals to work with and to talk about, because lightning is a very powerful medicine. And it's also one that has a lot of destructive capacity to it, right? Now, we know lightning is, I would say, like a big force, a big energy. It can cause big chaos, big destruction. It can light fires, right? It can kill you. But lightning is also a harmonizing force. And I think that's a really beautiful kind of counterbalance, right? It's a paradox. And the soil itself, right? The ground of the earth actually calls lightning down to refertilize the soil, to bring down nitrogen, right? And this injection of energy harmonizes. It's essential to keeping the balance of the soil, which, as we know, grows our food and keeps earth alive. So lightning is such a powerful force because it can do both. It can destroy, but it can also rebuild, right? So what that really kind of brought up is that there is a lot of these energies afoot right now, this sense of like chaos and destruction. And what do we do with this, right? It feels overwhelming and all around us. But I know that, like, myself personally feel there's also a sense of helplessness, right? We can't predict where a lightning bolt is going to strike. We can't prevent it from coming into our world. It just happens. And I think a lot of us kind of feel that sense of like helplessness, hopelessness in the face of the global conflicts that are happening right now. But something that my friend said that I thought was really powerful and essential is that we need chaos to touch all of us, not just the poor or the oppressed or people living in the far corners of the world. We need it to touch all of us, because when it touches all of us, things start to change. When chaos touches those who are in power, who are wealthy, things shift. And so right now, I think we are experiencing that increasing kind of climactic tension as we feel the energy of this chaos, especially in the Middle East, especially in Palestine, start to reach out into other corners of the world and shake us, right? Shake the ground beneath us, shake the buildings that we live inside. Because this sort of energy is not isolated. We actually need chaos and conflict to shake us out of rigid patterns and life ways that are inherently destructive. We might look at this conflict and say, this is so, like, oh, we don't want this. But look at what we're also living inside. We live in, and we're going to talk more about this too, is just like, we're living in a situation on planet Earth right now where there's a lot of destructive dynamics that are present in our everyday. And they keep persisting, even though we say, this isn't right, this isn't fair, this isn't good, this isn't healthy, this isn't what we want, this isn't what we voted for. And so, without fetishizing conflict or diminishing the intensity and the death and the consequences that come with conflict, I do think it's bringing us this reminder that conflict also exposes the heart of things, the deep truth of things, right? It's like the meat of it, what matters. And conflict and chaos are part of the natural sort of organizing forces at work in our world. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want it to like keep scaling up, but there's a reason that it's getting more intense, because it is trying to shake us out of a pattern that is also leading us towards a certain kind of death, right? A certain kind of catastrophe. Maybe it's just a little bit further down the line, but that doesn't mean it's any less devastating. So conflict might not always feel right or nice or good or like something we invited to dinner, but it is also essential. And it also is natural on a cosmic universal level. And I want us to remind us about that, because it's really easy to get like really sit with our humanness, but there are organizing forces above us that do not have a human perspective or moral code to contend with. These are laws of nature, and the laws of nature we will always be subject to. And so again, this is not to say that like these events happening in the world are right or ordained. I think that gets us into really sticky waters, but that there is an organizing force at work here. And I do believe it's trying to wake us up. And ultimately, we can't unlink death and destruction from life and creation. They go hand in hand. So, this dream really feels like, okay, like there are like great forces that are approaching, and all the buildings that we have believed to be stable are shaking. And what is that? What do we do with that? I think there is an opportunity here to evolve our approach to chaos and conflict. Absolutely. Of course, we want order, we want peace, but those things don't always come just, by meditating and like praying and wanting the best for things. They come because we are willing to embrace what's here, what's happening, and to look inside of it for, right, like another way, a different potential, a third path. And so I just kind of want to plant the seed of conflict does show us what is worth fighting for. It is showing us our utter humanity. And if we can harness the energy inside of that and do something constructive with it, we can harmonize and remake the world. Absolutely. Those energies go both ways, y'all. So I kind of want to, that's like the landscape and the context in which I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight exists. So I really invite you to sit with like, how do you approach conflict? How do you utilize conflict? And how do you let it reveal your beating heart? And then what do you do with that? How do you walk with that energy so that it doesn't envelop you, right? And destroy you, but enliven you? How do you let it recalibrate you or correct something that's out of balance? Now, when I think about this, kind of what came through, there is, Jeffrey, you said it, right? This reweaving, an opportunity to knit things together back in a different way. And that's a really powerful invitation. Now, we're all familiar with the word dismemberment, right? Dismemberment is to take something apart. But remembering is to put something back together. So when we remember things, we are actually putting something back together, something bigger than ourselves. So what I mean by that is a lot of this month's message is about right relationship and finding ways to come back into right relationship with things that we thought we left behind, or things that maybe were our ancestors, right? That we've inherited. How do we work with these energies, with these ideas, with these forces at work in our world, and remember, right? To put back together, maybe not in the way it was before, but without losing the essence of what is good and right and true, right? What we have always known or connected to. What do we do with that? So the first thing that the beings really wanted to talk about was ancestral relationships and life ways. And what I mean by life ways is like ways of life. Because a lot of what is happening right now, as we were kind of talking about before this recording started, is this is a really potent time in terms of these Aries, Libra eclipse energies. That's about karmic relationship, right? Looking at some of these big patterns that have been playing out in our lives for decades, right? These are big patterns. And that actually holds a lot of energy, right? Because we've been feeding that pattern for so long. And so when we start to break the patterns that have bound us for a really long time, there's a huge energy release. So in the same way, we are given this opportunity not only to shatter or break or unbind ourselves from patterns that are actually imprisoning or limiting or restrictive, we're also given the opportunity to reconfigure, to remember something, right? To offer this pattern a corrective force, a repatterning. And so these karmic relationships are not just like, oh, that ex that keeps coming back into my life and texting me. This is also relationships with our ancestors, with our lineage, with the ways that our people walked for millennia and that we've kind of discarded in modernity, right? It's like there's all of these. One of my favorite podcasts is The Emerald by Joshua Fry. And one of my favorite episodes is called Animism is Normative Consciousness. And what he means by that is animism, right? This idea that the world is alive and animate and we are in conversation with it. That was the normal way of being for thousands, if not millions of years in terms of human evolution. And that modernity itself, the way we live now, is a blip. And so look at how we orient to that blip. We've like blown it out of proportion and think of that as like the totality of existence almost. And with that, we've lost connection with so many other aspects of how human beings have always lived. So we are not in right relationship with that. Now, some of us are, right? Some indigenous cultures that still maintain that connection with those original life ways, but a lot of us are not. So this moment in particular in April, there's a lot here around the gifts, the patterns, the pain that we've inherited. And how do we be in relationship to that? And can we remember and bring back together traditions and life ways that were actually deeply in service to us and bring them back into our now? What came through is almost like repairing a rupture in the memory fabric of our existence, because it is a cellular memory, right? Your body knows things. Even if you don't know them at the top of your like consciousness right now, there's an ancient knowledge that lives within you. And it does come alive when given the opportunity, when there's a doorway, right? And one of the simplest ways to do that is nature. Your ancestors communed with nature. I don't care where you came from. Every single person's ancestors in this room watching this video communed with nature. Your ancestors had a relationship with nature that went beyond an extractive, right, relationship. It was one of kinship. It was one of communion. You could even say that nature was part of their community, right? One of the great jokes of like animism is that even talking about nature as outside of ourselves is new. There didn't used to be a word for nature because why? We were nature. We were a part of it. So in terms of like remembering and repairing a relationship, one of the core invitations that's coming through is how do you repair your relationship with nature? And this isn't just about growing your own food or having a garden or being more mindful about your carbon footprint. Like, yes, please do all those things. But what we are being invited to remember right now is like bigger than that. It's like a scale or two up from that. And this comes back to that idea that we are nature. Okay. So I know we've all felt this. There is a force, a current, an energy that runs through everything, right? We can't divorce ourselves from this. Call it God if you want to, but just for the purposes of keeping things like really clear and dialed, it's a force, it's energy, it's aliveness. And the more we allow ourselves to be in connection with nature, the more we actually become sensitized to this. The more we actually hear nature when it speaks, when it shows us things, because nature is not loud. It's not loud like social media is loud. It is subtle, right? The world does not scream at us. So we are being asked to align with this force again in ways that we have forgotten. Like it's one thing to go sit with plant medicine and be like, ooh, I really felt one with the universe. But this is about living that. Because most of us honestly have stepped out of it. And I mean that in the most basic and big and mundane of ways. We wear shoes that disconnect us from the earth. We live in houses that prevent us a lot of the times from really experiencing the natural world, right? Think about how much of your life is segmented inside of a box of a thing. You know, like sometimes the only time we go for a walk is like from our house to our car and then from our car to work. So a lot of us resist or actively work against it. I'm not saying that's the people here, but by and large, that's the experience of the culture in the West, right? Is that we fight nature, we contain nature, we work against it, we pave over it. And when you think about what that does on like a larger spiritual level, this actually creates distortions in reality because we have stepped outside of a relationship that is everything, right? It informs everything. And this is, I think, where humans got really lost in like their own like God ideas, right? Like equating themselves with God. This idea that we could step out and kind of rule nature instead of being in relationship with it. And what I mean by distortions in reality is it creates this idea that we can live outside of it and survive outside of it. Survive by like, again, destroying it, defiling it. Now, if we see this current, this force as a river, right? And we, like a magnet, kind of align ourselves with it. When we step outside of it, we actually create an eddy in that river, like a little pocket Oh, I gotta turn these things off. A little pocket where life starts to just kind of swirl and become stagnant. And we get stuck there, right? But if we listen to nature, if we align with nature, if we stop forcing our agendas onto nature, we could actually work with nature much more effectively. And we would probably achieve a lot of the same ends, but without far less destruction, because nature is a supreme consciousness. And anyone who has, communed with God or nature or the energies or plant medicine has felt that. And this supreme consciousness has a greater understanding of what serves life. For all of our technology, for all of our inventions, humans have not really unlocked that. So when we move against the timing and the pace and the flow of nature, we create dissonance. We create distortions. We create destructions. And ultimately, we create death. That is the inevitable outcome when you step outside the flow of life. So this is a big reason we see a lot of death in our world. We keep trying to step outside nature, step outside time, split the atom, play God, instead of listening, adjusting, attuning to what is happening. Now, there is no waste in nature. Everything feeds everything. Death feeds life in nature. Something rots and becomes food for something else. So even like waste products, right? Like our carbon dioxide is what the plants use to turn back into oxygen, which we need. It's beautiful. It's perfect. We have not improved upon it as much as Elon Musk tries. So everything feeds back into itself. And then we look at the world we've created, right? It's like piles of garbage, microplastics in the oceans, oil spills, monocultures, right? Death of topsoil. On top of that, we have wars and famine and all sorts of bullshit. We've created death. We continue to create and perpetuate death because we are not in accordance with life. And in the West, we are so out of alignment with it that it is actually destroying us. So we can't exist in this little distortion pocket forever, this eddy in the river. For a little bit, we did okay. But think of what happens to stagnant bodies of water, right? Think of a puddle. If it doesn't dry up, it gets mucky, right? Life starts to rot in it. It has nowhere to go. Whatever breeds there, creates like nastiness. It chokes out resources. Think of how algae works. So that is not an optimal environment for us. To be alive is to follow and allow the flow of life. Now, I could keep going on about this. We could wax poetic about life all day. But the real question, I want to come back to how your ancestors participated in life. What did that look like? And I'm talking like far back enough on the family tree where it does start to become more indigenous. And you might not have access to those narratives, to those names, and that's okay. But I really want you to think about like what traditions wove your people, your ancestral people, into a larger communal experience, a greater living reality. Did they live in tribes? Were they nomadic? Did they share child rearing? Did they have community gardens? Did they hunt as a group and split up the food? Did they live in longhouses? You might have to go like back farther than your family remembers. And that's the whole point, right? That's kind of part of this ritual. You might have to research the traditional ways of the indigenous groups that your ancestors descended from. And it might not be one group. I know it is not for me. And that's the fun of this. You might have to take some steps to really dig into this. but it will reveal a lot of information to you around how did your people live and how do they participate with nature, with life. Because the truth is, lifeways like this are written on your bones, in your being, right? Your people inhabited these stories, these ways of living for millennia. So even if it's not front and center, even if it's not something that's immediately accessible, right? There is still a deeper knowing that you can tap into and that I believe will start to come alive as you go back and do this research, as you poke around in there, right? Like my early people, one group is the Vikings. So it's been really interesting to go back and explore and be like, wow, okay, so they celebrated these traditions. This is how they did that. You know, they did this, they did that. This is what their spiritual practices looked like. You know, it creates this body of wisdom that then can inform yours. Now, the new ways are the ancient ways reborn. That's really kind of what we're playing with right now. We're at this like moment in time in history when we have a lot of new innovations in technology, and that's amazing, beautiful, glad we do. Running toilets are a plus. And it's never about leaving the past behind completely. There's always going to be something that wants to come with us and be reknit into new forms, right? New traditions, new cultures. And that is what I mean by the reweaving and the remembering, right? We are putting something back together, but maybe it looks a little bit different. And what does that look like in your life now? How could that look? What would you want to pass down to your children? Because we are at this point, right? We're kind of at like this climactic, like cliffhanger of a moment on planet Earth where all the new technology and all the cool, crazy inventions we have aren't really helping us get out of this shit. So, and here's the thing. I know some people are going to be like, well, but this doesn't problem solve that either. Maybe not immediately, maybe not directly. But I know that we do need to find some different pathways, right? To get back into the flow of life and live in accordance, right? Live in right relationship. So there's both a ritual for this one and a research adventure. And I really encourage you to do both. Because one is very spiritual and ancestral, right? That's the ritual. But the research adventure is the practical, the tangible. It's where it starts coming alive in your life, in your now. So I invite you to go on a research adventure and note what stands out to you about the people that you are connected to, right? Your ancestral traditions. And again, you might need to go look in some history books or poke around on the internet. It might not be immediately accessible in your like living family, and that's okay. So, and the other thing I want to say is like, this isn't necessarily about like giving up all of the trappings of your modern life and going to live in the Yukon and hunt bison again. But maybe it is about collectively growing and sharing food supplies. Maybe it is about reintroducing game meats into your diet. Maybe it is about getting a membership at a wholesale food, I don't know, co-op, not Costco, that allows you to purchase from farmers in bulk. Because what you are being asked to do is look at the traditions, look at the ways that these ancient people lived, and ask yourself, how could I borrow or translate that, innovate on that, and bring it into my life now? Is there something here for me that I could use that would actually reweave me back in? And not only just connect me with my ancestors, but connect me more deeply with life. And something that I was reading about yesterday that I just found really a powerful reminder was that, like, be mindful about waste. And it's funny because I remember being a kid and like my dad was washing out this plastic bag one night and I was like, Dad, just throw that in the garbage. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, no, we're going to recycle this. Like, we're going to use it again because that's wasteful. Like that goes to the earth. And it never even like clicked for me before then that like, oh, there isn't like a garbage monster just eating this all up. So I've just been really sitting with what does it mean to be in right relationship with the earth? And it means to really look at how I consume and to notice like, wow, there's a lot of ways that I have been very wasteful. And that does not honor the earth. That does not express gratitude for earth or for life. So I invite you to really think about practices of how do you recycle, reduce, reuse, right? Because that is a cycle of replenishment. So these are some of the more practical ways that you can work with this. Now, on a spiritual level, what they wanted y'all to do is a very traditional ritual in this lineage. And so it is one that we do when we are welcoming our elders, our ancestral elders into our life and asking them to walk with us. Because when it comes to the spirit world, they don't read your mind, first and foremost. And in order to really work with you, because we do live in a free will universe, you have to invite them. And you have to invite them out loud. So this ritual is calling your ancestral elders back into your life. And the way that we do that is we actually invite them to dinner. So you are going to make a feast for your ancestors. And I invite you to cook like ancestral food. So like, again, let's say you have a lot of Germanic ancestry. Maybe that's like, you know, brats and sauerkraut and mashed potatoes. And so really like an ancestral food or something that your actual elders ate. Maybe your grandparents had like a favorite food that they always cooked. Maybe your family always likes to barbecue together. Maybe your family hunts together and then they love to like eat the elk that they've hunted. I really want you to feel into what feels the like the most right way to honor your ancestors and what foods they would have eaten and enjoyed. So you are going to make them this beautiful feast. You're going to cook it, you're going to make it. As you're doing so, like put love into it, you know? Like you are really feeding them more than just your food. You are feeding them your energy and your prayers. So when the food is all ready, you are going to make an ancestral plate. And what that means is, you know, if you have 4 people that are in your family, you're going to have an extra plate. And the ancestral plate is the plate that we always make first. Gets a little bit of food from every dish. Doesn't need to be a full plate. It could be like, you know, a little side plate. But you want to make sure that they have a little bit of everything to eat. And you're going to put that in the middle. Then you're going to serve yourself. And before you eat, say a prayer, say an invocation out loud, speak your ancestors into being with you. Call them in. If you know their names, say their names, right? If you don't know their names, then simply, you know, I call on my grandmothers, all the way back to the beginning. I invite in my grandmothers, the mothers, the aunties, the sisters, the daughters that are in my lineage to sit with me tonight, to sit at my table, to break bread with me, because I want to walk with you. I want to feel your presence in my life. There's no right or wrong way to say this prayer, right? It's really what comes up from your heart. But invite them to be in your life. Invite them to partake of this meal. Let them know this offering is for them. What else? Ask them to guide you from beyond. Let them know that you're available to listen, that you want their guidance. Let them know your gratitude. Let them feel your gratitude. These are all ways that we can deepen our connection with our ancestral like realm. So speak blessings upon your ancestors and let them know that you've created this plate for them and you want them in your life. Then you go about and you eat your dinner, finish your meal, and then you are going to take this ancestral plate, which should still be full. Don't eat their food. And you are going to take it outside somewhere. Maybe it's your backyard. Maybe it's like a local park. But you are basically going to leave this plate of food for 24 hours somewhere on the earth or on like a beautiful stone. You'll find a little beautiful location. And you'll want to bring a little jar of clear spirits. And that could be like vodka, that could be gin, that could be Florida water. You just want to make sure it's clear. So no brown liquor, no red wine. Clear spirits is an amplification of a blessing. So you are basically inviting your ancestors to come join you, to be walking with you in your life. And you're kind of giving that a little boost, saying like, please send that prayer up all the way up. So you're going to pour those clear spirits over this plate of food when you leave it off out in the ground. And once again, thank them for coming in to support you and that you are excited for this connection. Leave it out there for about 24 hours. And when you are ready to retrieve this offering, I really ask that you don't just like put it in the garbage. If you have compost, put it there. You know, you could put it in the earth and bury it, but don't put it in the garbage because we want to find a way to honor the offering even when it's complete. So, moving to the next message. And this kind of ties in with everything that we've been talking about, which is that the healing we seek, especially right now, it exists at the level of community. We heal with and through community. It is in like an extended family. And there are many different kinds and sizes and levels of community, right? Our extended family can feel like a community. And sometimes our community can feel like a family, right? If we don't have closeness with our family of origins or what have you. So something I want everyone to reflect on, how do you currently participate in your community? Do you have communities? What do they look like? How do they practice? What do you do with them? How do you celebrate with them? How do you participate? How do you tend to these connections? How do you give back? How do you show up? Because these are places that right now we are being called to deepen and strengthen. Because another idea, another construct of Western culture that we are deconditioning ourselves out of is the idea that we are alone, that we are so hyper independent that we don't need help, that we don't need anyone else. Y'all, we are fragile. We need a lot of people to do this life. And burnout for many of us is real. And I think the reality of burnout is that we live in a culture that fetishizes and glorifies doing it all on your own, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But guess what? People have like that is such a new, again, that is a blip in the modernity bubble. For millennia, people have supported each other, have been weaving together, have been raising children inside of a community, because that made so much of daily existence manageable. So if you don't have a solid community around you, where would you like to have one? And is it around parenting? Is it around video games? Is it around sexual liberation, sobriety, bird watching? What do you care about? Where do you desire additional support or kinship, right? Where do you want to deepen or strengthen your networks? These are all questions to ask yourself because I truly believe that it is not just about having one community, but many overlapping ones. Places that we can go when we need to be seen, to be witnessed, to be validated, to be held. This is essential to not only human survival, but human thriving. And something to think about too, because I know that a lot of us have deep wounds around community, right? Like this is something that has been very fractured in the Western like cultures. And that's created a lot of trauma and pain, especially for people who feel like they don't fit in or have felt outcasted from community or have just really struggled to find the right ones. Now, if you feel like you are starved for community, the question I have for you is how can you be bred? And what I mean by that is if you want to be fed, be bred. So a lot of the times when we want something so deeply, the way to actually start calling that into our lives is to start giving it, even though it might feel counterintuitive. So, for instance, I want a partner, right? I want a romantic partner. Now I could sit there and feel how deeply I want that, but that might also show me how alone I feel. Now, if instead I practice loving my friends and loving my family and really showing up and participating in ways that demonstrate my love and demonstrate connection and demonstrate relationship, all of a sudden it's number one, I no longer am starving for something, and I'm no longer coming from a place of scarcity. And two, it becomes a lot easier to call those things into our lives because we are embodying the energy that we desire to call in. So I'll just say that again, because I think it's a little like fun mnemonic device, which is if you want to be fed, be bread. So I do want to say too, around this line of how exploring our community desires can also bring up difficult feelings of rejection or alienation or isolation, especially if we're not in a place yet where we feel deeply connected or that we have a thriving community. And this is part of the healing, right? We don't heal in isolation. We heal through connection. We heal through looking at the parts and the pieces and the places that come up for our love and attention and care as we start to move into expressions of our desire. Now, one way that I really like to think about this is like desire is an arrow, right? Desire is an arrow that comes from our heart and it's looking for a target. It's trying to land somewhere. But everything that gets pulled up as I am aiming that desire, right? As I'm like putting that desire out into the world, everything that comes up that desire kind of touches is a place that needs healing. So I'll give you an example. If I want to use this, example of like a relationship, if I want like a partner, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. I want a partner. This is what I'm aiming for. It might bring up in me feelings of unworthiness. It might bring up in me old wounding. It might bring up in me unhealed parts of previous relationships or old traumas. It might show me places where I need to be more brave. And so when we encounter those parts of us that come up for healing and attention, it's really important to tend to them because it is through that tending that we actually become more whole, more ready, more able to receive and find the things we desire. So if that happens, which it is, I'm sure, bound to happen, right? That's part of the healing process. Don't run away from it. Do your best to turn towards it and embrace it and open to it because there is something in there that is going to lead you closer to what you want if you are brave enough to face it and confront it and integrate it. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, the eclipses this month are very karmic and are calling forward a lot of these old patterns, old relationships, old threads, a lot of the old stories that are keeping us stuck, that are actually showing us where we have inhibited our own potential. And so now is a good time to examine anything that's coming up, right? I know some people are saying, like, I'm seeing a lot of my nose, I'm seeing a lot of my edges, I'm seeing, right? We're like in there, we're in the cracks, we're in the mucky stuff. But that is such a powerful place to be, right? The darkness has so many treasures for us if we are willing to look for them. So if you have any wounds around community, I invite you to ask yourself, what keeps me from experiencing deeper community? What needs to be looked at, healed, or released? Where do I need to be more brave? Where do I need to put myself out there more? Am I willing to do this? Because ultimately, it is our willingness to face the things that terrify us It is that. It is our willingness to face those things that opens up these doorways, these portals of transformation. And we can leap through them to completely new timelines. We can find our way to amazing possibilities that would have felt impossible a month or so ago. So really, I invite you to trust yourself. I invite you to trust what comes up. All of it is fuel for your alchemical, like, transformation. Now, this is a ritual for y'all. So these questions that I just posed here are going to be really helpful if there's any wounding around community. But even if there's not, it's a good time to examine your stories and fears and desires around community. Now, I want you to do that and I want you to write them out. So you're really clear. Here's what is standing in the way between me and my desires when it comes to community. And then you're going to find a bunch of pennies, like currency. All right. Maybe you go get a roll of pennies. Maybe you just scrape up your change jar. I know most of us have like a couple of them rattling around somewhere. You want enough pennies for all of the stories and fears and wounds that you have, right? Whatever needs to be cleared around community, you're going to need a penny for. And then I want you to take this list of fears or worries or concerns or what have you, right? Anything stopping you from fully being in the communities that are most in service to you, most supportive of you right now. So take those pennies, take this list, and go to a river. You're going to need running water. Now, the bigger the river, the better, right? Because that just means like more force, more energy, more healing that can move this energy for you, because that's what rivers do. Now, you're going to go and stand by the river. You're going to need a place where you can actually access the river, right? Where you can like touch the water safely. So you're going to stand at the edge of the river and you're going to take these pennies and you're going to go one by one. And you're going to speak out loud each fear, each old story, each limiting belief, right? Into this penny, one by one. And if you don't have fears, you can speak your desires. I really want to find this. Help me find it. And then you are going to hurl that penny into the river one by one. Take as much time as you need. Really feel it. Really feel yourself release this story. Really allow yourself to open to the possibility that it can change in an instant, that you can let that go. And when you are complete with this, you are to wash and bless your hands and feet in the river as a reminder that you can become a new person. You can change an old, deeply ingrained way of being, and that new possibilities are everywhere around you. So rinse off any of that old energy, give it a good scrub, and you walk away from the river like you're a brand new person. And see what happens when you believe it.